But Brandon, let's move on into our next topic, and we're moving over to the other side of the whole bracket. We looked at the South region, we looked at the West region. Now we are looking at the the East region, because Purdue's in that region. You want to know why I know Purdue's in that region? Because guess who we got on the line, Brandon? I
you
gave
just
you the
gave
answer.
it away.
We got Matt on the line. Matt, how you doing today?
Surprise. I'm doing good. How are you guys?
I am doing great. Today's the best day ever. I mean, the clock's moved forward, which everyone's like, oh my God, we lost an hour of sleep. But I'm like, yes, spring is one day closer, and we get an extra hour of sunlight during the day, and we get our bracket. So I am peachy keen. We're going to look at this region, though. Main reason we had you on is, A, because like you guys at home can check out the $10 tier, be like Matt, and join us on a podcast. But number 2, you wanted to be on this podcast in order to talk Purdue wherever they may be. The bracket has it set up where Purdue is the 2nd seed in the East, going up against CS Fullerton in the first round. Matt, since you're a Purdue fan, I'm going to ask you first, what do you think of the seeding for Purdue? And then 2, what do you think about this first round matchup against number 15 CSU Fullerton?
I think the seeding is about as good as Purdue could have expected. Realistically, I mean, when we, go back to the reveal a few weeks ago, Purdue was still slated as a 1, even having come off 2 losses in that week to Ohio State and Michigan State. And then since then, you're talking a really bad loss to Wisconsin, which I think all Purdue fans pretty much knew at that point the 1 seed was gone. But then they kind of got it back together, closed the season out fairly well. They got spanked a little bit by Michigan in the Big Ten title game, but, they themselves are on a roll. So I think the 2 seed is about pretty good and about as much as we could have expected. With regards to the matchup against CS Fullerton, my plethora of knowledge on that team is is not there. But I guess just looking into their conference and who they've kind of played, they've struggled against some of the better teams they played, like USC blew them out by 40. I don't have it up anymore, but I think they got blown out by like Gonzaga maybe. So I don't know that it's terribly concerning. I think Purdue will be okay there. Of course, I say that, and how heartbroken would I be if they lose? But I don't see that being an issue. It'll be interesting though down the road how the matchups line up.
So, Matt, you're obviously too nice of a guy, but let me be that guy. CSU Fullerton's going to get their ass kicked.
Will they, though?
And Purdue's going to win. But my question is, so Purdue loses in the Big Ten championship game to Michigan. Mm-hmm. How much does that worry you? Not for a game like CSU Fullerton, but for games after that, where they may be playing Florida. They may be playing Texas Tech. How much does that worry you in a game like that after and let me tell you, Michigan has been a very competitive team, really all season long, certainly from the middle of the season on, and very much so against Purdue. But how much does that worry you, Purdue losing in that Big Ten championship game to then having to play a team like I mentioned, Texas Tech or Florida or a team like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some worry. I mean, even outside of just that game, I think there's worry now that everyone keeps saying there's kind of a blueprint to beat Purdue now. And a lot of that surrounds around letting Haas go inside one-on-one, but then eliminating the shooters on the outside and trading 2-point baskets instead of threes from Purdue. And Purdue's really at their best when they've got inside and outside going, and you can't guard them. So in regard to the specifics with Michigan, I mean, Michigan, to be honest, is a terrible matchup from Purdue. Just the fact that Wagner, the 5, can stretch the defense and shoot threes. Haas can't defend that, and they put Purdue in pick and rolls, and the defense was in scramble mode. So it's, to be honest, it kind of shocks me looking back that they were able to beat Michigan twice in the regular season, and fortunate to do so. But I think concerning definitely that if a team similar to Michigan that has 5 guys in the court that can stretch you out or can put you in pick and rolls, that's certainly going to, bring into light the weaknesses of Purdue. It'd just be a matter of, can they correct those? Can they fix those for the NCAA tournament? And can their offense still be on par?
And Matt, I'm going to come back at you with another one. Isaac Haas, he's been, and he has been, just a force for Purdue for quite some time now. And not just this season, but for a number of years. But if a team is able to take him out of the game, how much is that going to affect Purdue where they may lose a game solely because a team was able to find a way to get rid of Isaac Haas from scoring during the game? Because, he's a huge force. You just kind of talked about it a little bit. Not only offensively, but defensively. And if they're able to take him away, does Purdue have enough outside of him to be able to make up for what he would not be bringing and be effective and win the game ultimately?
I think so, and the reason why I'm going to go on a love session here is Carson Edwards. People coming into the season, I think Purdue knew that he was going to make a huge stride just because he played on a USA under 19 team, and then additionally Purdue themselves represented Team USA in the World University game. So even though he's a sophomore, he's essentially played as many games as most juniors between all that preparation. And then you see what he's done within the last month. He went off for 40 against Illinois, and on most games he's been getting 20 plus. So he's just so dynamic, and he really is crazy because he's the sophomore in the team. The four other senior starters, he's kind of the one that's going to make them tick. He's the dynamic guard they haven't had in the NCAA tournament that, most teams that make a deep run, they do have. So I think a lot's going to ride on him and just how much he can kind of take over a game and how much attention he needs, and that'll open up other guys.
And you had to throw in there the game against Illinois, didn't you? You had to just give that little dig, man. It was probably a game where it's on there, and Matt's what? I gotta mention it because of Ricky. Just got to get that one dig that they're not in the tournament. But the thing with Purdue, before we move on to, because I want to look at other teams that they could play and look at the other matchups. The thing with the Big Ten overall, and we've probably mentioned this to this point already in the podcast, both Brandon and I, but to me, the 2 seeding for Purdue is a main cause of when the Big Ten tournament was. With the Big Ten tournament being a week before everyone else, usually it's today. So, you could go flip side and say, well, you know what? The tournament actually would have hurt them then if the conference final was today, because they would have lost to Michigan today if we're assuming the same final went hold. But also at Purdue, the thing that I'll look at in most of the Big Ten teams is how are they going to come out with having a week off, now having another almost half a week off before Purdue. They're going to play on Friday for their first game. They have an 11:40 a.m. tip Central Time in Detroit, Michigan, which would be about 12:40 local time there. Let's look at the next matchup that they could play out of the 2 teams that they could play in that second round. You got 7-seed Arkansas, 10 Butler. This is, and I know Brandon was joking at you before we started recording, this is a matchup where if you're a Purdue fan, I don't know which team you want. Do you want a team like Butler, who's the 10, that's a kind of an in-state thing going on there, but also it's one of those games like Brandon said to you, Matt, before we recorded, it's a game that, Purdue's supposed to win it, so I guess they'll lose it. Or do you want a team like Arkansas, who has a guy like we've talked about on the NBA side with Daniel Gafford, who could go one-on-one with Haas down low? For me, I'd pick Butler if I'm a Purdue fan, but really I'm not confident in either of those teams coming out of that matchup to play me. What are you thinking about that 7-10 matchup, Matt?
Yeah, I think so. Purdue actually played Butler on a neutral court earlier this year, and to be honest, they handled business pretty well. I think they beat them by 15 or so. So, you say that and you think, okay, why wouldn't we want Butler? Mm-hmm. And I think we probably do between the two because, from what I understand, Arkansas is a little more dynamic. You're talking about NBA talent that they have on the roster that you probably don't want to run into. Butler just scares me just because they've had those runs where no one thinks they're going to do anything, and somehow they're making back-to-back national championships. Now, obviously, different coach and everything, but they always seem to find a way when it comes to March to put it all together. But that said, I still think just given that we've already beat them this year and we know them, that's what we want to play.
Butler's the team I'd look at too, mainly because the only thing I wanted to say is ever since February 6th, they've had 3 wins. So they haven't really been on a good hot streak. However, coming into the tournament, it could start right now and you could just catch fire day one.
So what I want to ask is about this team, this Florida team. Mm-hmm. And the reason I ask about them and I talk about them and how dangerous they can be is because, I mean, we saw what they could do last year. And Florida is good. Florida is one of those teams. They get to the tournament. Mm-hmm. They're a tournament team.
Well, and they're going to play one of the play-in winners between the Bonnies and L.A.
Which I know that is not – I don't think that's going to be an easy game for them.
No.
But I still am going to – I'm going to give it to Florida, most likely, unless I change my mind in my bracket later on. But
that's the only thing I hate doing this day of.
I know.
Like, I like this team.
I know. And Ricky, oh my gosh.
UCLA,
Ricky is a flavor of the day kind of guy. So
ask me Thursday when they lost.
I'm going to say Thursday. Ask me Thursday right before the game. He can change his mind one more time.
Well, I can't. The bracket's locked.
I'm gonna say right before it locks up. I'm going to say Florida's going to win that. I'm going to say Texas Tech's going to win their game. Florida, they're dangerous. Texas Tech, they're a team that's been really good all season long.
Texas Tech playing FS Austin.
Purdue, let's say everything goes really well for them. They beat CSU Fullerton. We all know that's going to happen. If it doesn't, I'll eat my words on this freaking show right then and there. But I say they beat Arkansas or Butler, whoever that is, probably Butler. But Florida or Texas Tech, Matt, which one of those teams scares you the most and why?
All the above.
Everything you just said. That's why.
Because it's March and it's Purdue, and
they suck at that time. And I'm being honest with you, man. I mean, I'm not trying to dig on your team, but Purdue gets to a point and they get in their own brains and they screw themselves over.
You're absolutely right. I mean, they haven't made a Final Four since 1980, which, I mean, it's crazy for all the credit Gene Cady gets. He never even led them to a Final Four. But that's what I think worries every Purdue fan is this is the year, right? The pieces are in place, but just there's that doubt knowing what's happened over the last few years. But that said, I think I'd rather play an inconsistent Florida team, at least inconsistent throughout this year. They obviously, like you spoke to last year, they went on a run, got to the Elite Eight, I think. But Texas Tech scares me just because they were at the top of a really good conference, and then kind of a weird reason, but their coach is Chris Beard, who sure enough was the Arkansas Little Rock coach that beat Purdue.
How about it?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, so I don't need that creeping back into my mind. But yeah, I think Florida for that reason, just because they've been inconsistent. I know they're talented, but I mean, it's Sweet 16, right? You can't keep avoiding talented teams, so you got to take something. So
well, and that's what I think about this region as a whole is like Texas Tech, SF Austin. Upsets can happen, I know that, but I like Texas Tech to win that one. I'll be honest, right now I look at it, my mind could change on Tuesday only because UCLA could win that game. But I see the Bonnies from St. Bonaventure beating the Bruins and then making a run. Like if the Bonnies play Florida, that's one of my upsets is picking St. Bonaventure. Then you don't have to worry about Florida. But then I look at the top of the bracket, like this region for Purdue, you look at it and it's not the strongest top teams, but you look at all of them and you go, I could see us losing to each one. Like the teams that kind of jump out to me, obviously Villanova is the 1 seed. Yeah, they got a scare from Providence, but I don't expect them to get any trouble heading into the Elite Eight. Maybe Alabama gives them a run. Maybe West Virginia gives them a run.
You're not even going to give them Virginia Tech? You're not even going to go with your team? You're not even going to give your team some credit, Ricky?
I like Colin Sexton a lot right now. I know I had him 20 in our last big board, but coming into tournament play, if he could do half of what he did in the SEC tournament, then at worst, Alabama's a one-and-done team, only because they would have to play number 1 Villanova in the second round.
Let's check Ricky's bracket day of, because he's going to have Virginia Tech guaranteed. Let's not even lie about it. He's going to be having Virginia Tech.
That might be the 8-9 where I actually have to flip a coin.
But Matt, how about that? How about Colin Sexton right now with what he's doing with Alabama? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you saw what he did in that very first game of the SEC tournament. He wins the game for him on a final shot. The next game they go out and they whoop ass on Auburn. Talk a little bit about what you think, and maybe you haven't watched him all season long, and that's fine, but what he could be and what he could do for Alabama in this tournament.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it takes one guy getting hot like that, and he can just carry his team to a deep run. I think that's definitely a prime opportunity. You're talking a stellar freshman that so dynamic and confident. I think that's more than anything. You got to be confident to take the big shots, and clearly he's willing to do that and step up for his team. So, who knows with Villanova, if he just goes off, they got a shot. But I don't know. Villanova just seems too deep and too composed, and they've been here before, that I just don't know if I see that happening.
Well, and I mean, for me, out of this entire region, the one team that I kind of gravitate to, I'll say a little bit, is the Wichita State game. And that's the reason I say that is Wichita's a team where smaller school, but they've always been there. And they're a team that they got mad because when they were undefeated, had to play that Kentucky team and lost to that Kentucky team. But this is a Wichita team that of recently lost in their tournament to the team that Brandon said had to make a run and almost won their conference tournament in the Houston Cougars that are in the field. But they're a team that lost at Cincinnati recently, lost to Houston, like I said. They get a 13 Marshall. They're the team that, to me, is the most interesting high seed in this entire bracket, because they're a team to me could either make a run, beat a West Virginia, beat a Villanova possibly, beat a Purdue if that's the matchup in the Elite Eight, or they could be a team that loses to Marshall and then they're done in day one. Matt, what do you think about Wichita State? And do you think, Purdue fan and you, do you think we could see a Wichita State Purdue Elite Eight?
I think it's possible. I mean, I think there's a reason they were even top 5 entering the season, despite, them being in kind of a smaller conference. I think they have talent and returning talent that has been a part of NCAA tournaments. So, and Craig Marshall, obviously, he's been here before. He's been down this road. And I think they, like you said, they have the potential to go far. They have the potential to get beat right away. That's true of most teams, but it's true in their case too. I think the reason for concern maybe is that they're not necessarily playing their best basketball right now, and they haven't maybe lived up quite to what those expectations were. Not that they couldn't now, but yeah, that's just what I'm thinking.
Now, last question I want to ask has to do with the team that we've kind of mentioned, but we haven't talked about, and that's the 1 seed, the team that sits at the absolute top. Villanova, not the overall number 1. That odd went to the South number 1 in Virginia. B, I'm going to come to you first. Villanova gets a play-in winner, so they will play whoever wins that play-in game. That'll happen in Dayton in the first round. How confident are you, and I'm going to ask you this on every segment, how confident are you that in this 1 seed to go all the way and reach the Final Four through their bracket?
Who's Villanova's coach?
It is Jay Wright.
Remind me, yeah.
Not Jay Wright. Is it Jay Wright?
Jay Wright.
Okay, I'm like, I got his last name.
Jay Wright.
I was thinking Jay Will in my head. Jay Williams.
I love Jay Will. He's the man. He is the man. I mean, how many half-court shots he made this season on game day? But Jay Wright, he is one outstanding coach. And I truly mean that. Read up on any stories. And Matt, I don't know, maybe you may have, maybe you have not, but if you haven't, you definitely have to. Read up on the stories about this guy. Read up on the stories about what he has done, how he's changed this program at Villanova to be the way that they are right now. This guy is not only a fantastic guy, but he is one of the best coaches, truly, in all of college basketball. Everyone looks at the Krzyzewskis and the Roy Williams and everything like that, but people need to also include Jay Wright in that conversation because he's extremely smart and he knows what he's doing. Villanova has a very good chance to be a Final Four team. They really do because they're so well coached. Jalen Brunson, he's one of the best players. He's one of the best players in all of college basketball. I mean, people talk about Wooden Award winners, and everyone wants to put what's his name? We love him, Trae Young. Everyone wants to put Trae Young in there. He should be a candidate for sure, but look at Brunson. Look at what he's done all season long. Don't look at just what he did at the beginning. Don't look at what he just did in the end. Look at what he's done all season long. This Villanova team, right now, every year that they're in the tournament, they're a dangerous team. They're Elite Eight bound for sure. They definitely have a chance at the Final Four and beyond, depending on what their matchup is, what happens. I mean, like Matt said, there's always going to be teams that are hot, players that are hot at the right time, and they're going to do well for their teams and stuff like that. And if, a lot of times you have the number 1 seed and a team goes up against them and knocks them off. But Villanova, because they have such a great coach, Brunson, such a great player and a leader on that team, they could go as far as both of them can take them. And I think that's very far.
Well, and Jalen Brunson is the one that I wanted to mention really before Matt comes in, because I remember when he came out of high school, I was for sure, I'm like, okay, Stevenson guy, he's the guy, he's gonna pick Illinois. He's gonna pick the Illini and home team, our state, our team. That's what it's gonna be. Well, he picked a winner in Villanova, and I mean, good for him because he's in the tournament. He's gonna be the one to make this it's a team effort, but he's gonna be, to me, the driving force for this team if they want to win and if they want to go to the Final Four. What do you think, Matt, about Villanova to close everything out for the segment?
I think they're darn good, and I think Brunson gets, well, you're saying he doesn't even maybe get the love he deserves because he's so good, but I think the guy that kind of falls in the cracks too is, and I don't know how you pronounce his first name, I think it's Mikal Bridges, but oh my goodness, he's probably just as good, but just kind of, the second in command there, so he doesn't get the attention. So you've got 2 stud NBA guys leading that team. I think, and they're deep. I mean, it's not just them; it's all those guys. They've been here now. They've been through it. They seem so composed at the end of tight games that other teams don't necessarily have. That I think that's going to carry them through more than anything. They impress me for sure, and I see them going pretty far.
Well, B, going to come to you like I always do to end. Any final thoughts before we move on? Before we say goodbye to Matt and we move on?
I don't want to say goodbye to Matt. I would like to keep him here for the entire time. No, I think that, when we wrap it all up and we look at this.
Put a nice bow on it.
Yeah, I love. I
Is it a pink bow? Is it a blue
I'm not going to put a bow on
bow?
it because I'm not really good at arts and crafts and stuff, but you can if you'd like.
We'll put a little pink bow on it.
But taking a look at, honestly, this region, the East region with Purdue and everything like that, I think Purdue has a really good shot at being able to make it as far as they've ever made it this season. And I think it's because they've got really good senior leadership. I think that they have really good talent. They obviously have good coaching. I mean, Matt Painter is really good. I know people have dogged him because, Matt Painter can only take them so far, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I understand I get where the critics are coming from, but I also know that Purdue's better than what they've done. So they could really do a whole lot this season. But when you look at everything else, too, I think you've got really good talent throughout this region with Purdue, with Texas Tech, with Florida, because they are. I mean, as Matt said, they're one of those inconsistent teams, but as cold as they could be, they're just as hot on the other side they could be. Wichita State, they're very talented. Alabama, they could light fire. Villanova, of course. St. Bonaventure, the Bonnies. I'm right there with you, Ricky. I think that they're a team that if they win,
I'd feel a little better if they didn't get upset in their conference tournament, but I'm still behind them. I'm still behind the Bonnies.
But if they win, if they beat UCLA and they're the 11 seed, Florida, watch out, because they really could be that team in the East bracket that makes a bit of a run.
Two teams I want to mention before we close this out. Number one is my double-seeded team to possibly make a run in this. Matt, close your ears. Butler. I know I talked about them not having a good thing, but if they can beat Arkansas, then get a second-round win over Purdue, that could be enough to kind of jumpstart them a little bit and make them go through a run. They're going to be my double-seeded team to watch. My non-top 4 team to watch, Press Virginia. They're a team that going up against the Racers from Murray State in round 1, but then if they can beat to me, a weaker top 4 team of a bracket in Wichita State, they to me could be the best challenge Villanova has all the way. Sorry for knocking Purdue in this, but all the way until that Final Four game because of the type of defense that they play. So they're a team for me to watch. But this is where you guys come in and let us know what you think down below in that comment section.